Judith is an exemplary Jewish woman. Her deed is probably invented under the influence of the account of the 12th century BCE Kenite woman Jael, Judgment 5:24-27, who killed the Canaanite general Sisera by driving a tent peg through his head. Judith, the protagonist of the book, introduced in chapter 8 as a God-fearing woman, she is the daughter of Merari, a Simeonite and widow of a certain Manasseh or Manasses, a wealthy farmer. She sends her maid or waiting woman to summon Uzziah so she can challenge his decision to capitulate to the Assyrians if God has not rescued the people of Bethulia within 5 days. And she uses her charm to become an intimate friend of Holofernes, but beheads him, allowing Israel to counterattack the Assyrians. Judith's maid, not named in the story, remains with her throughout the narrative and is given her freedom as the story ends. The Book of Judith is a deuterocanonical book included in the Septuagint and the Catholic and Eastern Orthodox Christian Old Testament of the Bible, but excluded from the Hebrew canon and assigned by Protestants to the apocrypha. It tells of a Jewish widow, Judith, who uses her beauty and charm to kill an Assyrian general who has besieged her city, Bethulia. With this act, she saves nearby Jerusalem from total destruction. The name Judith, Hebrew Yevdit, modern Yehudit, Tiberian Yehudit, meaning praised or Jewess, is the feminine form of Judah. The surviving manuscripts of Greek translations appear to contain several historical anachronisms, which is why some Protestant scholars now consider the book ahistorical. Instead, the book is classified as a parable, theological novel, or even the first historical novel. The Roman Catholic Church formally maintained the book's historicity, assigning its events to the reign of King Manasseh of Judah, and that the names were changed in later centuries for an unknown reason. The Jewish encyclopedia identifies Shechem, modern-day Nablus, as Bethulia, and argues that the name was changed because of the feud between the Jews and Samaritans. If this is the case, it would explain why other names seem anachronistic as well. Imagine a woman so fearless, so committed to her people and her God, that she would risk everything to stand against the most powerful military force of her time. Yet most Bibles do not include her story. The Book of Judith, a tale revered in Catholic Eastern Orthodox, Ethiopian Orthodox and Anglican traditions, has been cast aside in others deemed too controversial, perhaps too unsettling. But why would such a dramatic and faith-filled story be left out? The Book of Judith opens during a time of unimaginable pressure for the people of Israel. The Assyrian Empire, led by the ruthless king Nebuchadnezzar, seeks total domination. This isn't a kingdom satisfied with mere borders or treaties. It wants the complete submission of every land and every people. Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Nineveh and Assyria. He is so proud that he wants to affirm his strength as a sort of divine power, although Holofernes, his Turton, commanding general, goes beyond the king's orders when he calls on the Western nations to worship only Nebuchadnezzar and invoke him as a god. Holofernes is ordered to take revenge on those who refuse to ally themselves with Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar's power is unmatched, and his vast army under the command of the feared general Holofernes marches forward like a storm, crushing everything in its path. Holofernes, the antagonist of the book, he is a dedicated soldier of his king, general-in-chief of his army, whom he wants to see exalted in all lands. He is given the task of destroying the rebels who did not support the king of Nineveh in his resistance against Kileud and the king of Media, until Israel also becomes a target of his military campaign. Israel stands defenseless, their cities vulnerable, their hope dwindling. In the midst of this darkness rises Judith, a woman of faith, cunning and courage. But make no mistake, this is not a romanticized story of a beautiful widow. The Book of Judith is raw, real, uncut, and at times bloody. Judith steps out of the shadows with a mission that defies every expectation of her time. Her story is about confronting the impossible, armed with nothing but faith, wisdom, and a razor-sharp resolve. If you've ever wondered why such a powerful story was removed from so many versions of the Bible, stay with us. In this video, we'll journey through the hidden story of Judith, uncovering the layers of faith, bravery, and divine providence that make her one of Scripture's most fascinating and formidable women. Also, other people mention are Achior, an Ammonite leader at Nebuchadnezzar's court. In chapter 5, he summarizes the history of Israel and warns the king of Assyria of the power of their God, the God of heaven, but is mocked. He is protected by the people of Bethulia and is Judaized and circumcised on hearing what Judith has accomplished. Bagwas, or Vago Vulgate, the eunuch who had charge over Holofernes' personal affairs. His name is Persian for a eunuch. He brought in Judith to recline with Holofernes and was the first one who discovered his beheading. Uzziah, governor of Bethulia. Together with Kabri and Carmi, he rules over Judith's city. When the city is besieged by the Assyrians and the water supply dries up, he agrees to the people's call to surrender if God has not rescued them within 5 days, a decision challenged as rash by Judith. Are you ready to uncover the lost story of a woman who changed the course of history? To Judith's story, we need to set the scene. The Book of Judith begins not in Israel, but in the heart of the Assyrian Empire, a kingdom determined to bring the world to its knees. Nebuchadnezzar, the king of the Assyrians, demands absolute loyalty when neighboring nations refuse to submit to him. He wages a brutal campaign of conquest and terror. Enter Holofernes, the king's most trusted general and the instrument of his wrath. Holofernes is more than just a soldier, he's Nebuchadnezzar's war machine, a figure who strikes fear into the hearts of all who stand against Assyria. As he marches through the lands, cities fall one by one, and those who resist are met with unimaginable violence. By the time he reaches the borders of Israel, his army is like a tidal wave, vast, unstoppable, and fueled by the might of one of the greatest empires of the ancient world. Israel finds itself caught in a nightmare. Surrounded by Assyrian forces, they know that resistance means certain destruction. Their leaders are paralyzed with fear, their courage waning as they see the fate of neighboring nations. The people of Israel are desperate, clinging to their faith, yet wondering if God has abandoned them. The stage is set for annihilation, and all hope seems lost. In a time when all the men around her tremble. This widow from a small town becomes the most unlikely of heroes. But how could one woman, a widow with no military training, possibly stand against the might of Assyria, with God with her? Judith's story unfolds not through the strength of armies, but through faith and an unparalleled boldness that would shake the very foundations of Israel's enemies. As the story unfolds, we meet Judith's character, and Faith Judith, a woman unlike any other in the ancient world. She's introduced as a widow, but her identity reaches far beyond her marital status. Judith is a woman of striking beauty, profound wisdom, and unyielding faith. Her name, which means Jewish or praised, foreshadows her role as a heroine for her people and a defender of Israel's honor. But Judith's power isn't derived from physical strength or wealth. It's her faith and courage that set her apart in a world where men like Holofernes command power through brute force. Judith lives in Bethulia, a small town at the edge of the Assyrian advance, perched on the brink of invasion. And while the elders of her town are paralyzed with fear, uncertain of their next move, Judith's response is unthinkable. She fasts, prays, and dresses in sackcloth, humbling herself before God. She seeks his guidance, not just for herself, but for all of Israel. This is where her story truly begins, in solitude, in prayer, and in surrender to a God whom she knows is capable of deliverance. But Judith is not only pious, she is keenly aware of her people's despair when the elders of Bethulia begin to lose faith, suggesting that perhaps God has abandoned them. Judith's indignation flares. In Judith 82, she confronts them boldly, questioning their lack of trust in God. Who are you to test God today, to place yourselves in the Lord's place? Her words pierce through their fear and remind them that God's power cannot be confined to human expectations. In a world where women were rarely seen as leaders, let alone warriors, Judith steps forward with a strength that comes not from societal authority, but from an unshakable conviction. She reminds the leaders of Bethulia that God has delivered Israel countless times and will do so again if only they believe. Judith's faith is her greatest weapon, and she wields it with absolute confidence. Her message is clear. Their hope lies not in the strength of arms, but in complete surrender to God's will. But Judith is about to do more than just talk. She has a plan, one that requires both unimaginable bravery and a willingness to risk everything. It's a plan that will bring her face to face with the brutal Holofernes himself. placing her life on the line in the most dangerous way imaginable as the Assyrian faith and deception on the path to victory army presses closer. Judith reveals a plan so audacious, so dangerous, that it shocks the leaders of Bethulia. This isn't a call to arms or a plea for negotiation. Judith has decided that she will go alone into the enemy's camp and confront General Holofernes herself. It is a mission laced with danger, but Judith's faith is unwavering. She believes that God has placed this mission on her heart and that he will deliver Israel by her hand. Judith prepares with meticulous care, understanding that her survival and Israel's victory depends on both her faith and her cunning. She discards her widow's garb, removing her sackcloth and ashes. Instead, she adorns herself in fine garments, anointing her skin with fragrant oils, placing jewelry upon her neck and wrists, and styling her hair with great care. She transforms herself into a vision of beauty and elegance, an image designed to captivate and disarm. Judith knows the power of appearances, and she uses it not out of vanity, but as a tool of divine strategy. The people of Bethulia watch in awe, uncertain and fearful. Some may wonder if Judith is sacrificing herself, walking into the very jaws of the beast, but Judith knows what she is doing. Her transformation is not just physical, it is spiritual preparation. She carries with her a heart sharpened by prayer and unshakable faith that God will give her victory. In Judith 10:12, she boldly declares the Lord has struck him down by the hand of a woman, prophesying the fate that awaits Holofernes. Under the cover of night, Judith and her maids slip out of the city gates and approach the enemy lines. When the Assyrian guards spot her, they are stunned by her beauty and allow her through, astonished by the audacity of an unarmed woman walking into their camp. She tells them that she has fled Bethulia and seeks an audience with Holofernes, claiming that she can provide him with critical intelligence to help him conquer the city. The word reaches Holofernes quickly, and the mighty general, driven by both curios and arrogance, summons her to his tent. Here Judith begins the intricate dance of faith and deception. She speaks to Holofernes with humility, presenting herself as a humble widow who has come to offer herself as a servant. She weaves a web of half-truths and ambiguous promises, luring Holofernes into a false sense of security. Judith's words are laced with charm and wit, appealing to Holofernes' ego and feeding his belief in his invincibility. She promises him victory over Israel and subtly hints that she possesses divine favor. Holofernes, captivated by her beauty and her words, is completely taken in. He believes that this alluring stranger is the key to his conquest, that she has come to deliver Israel into his hands, but Judith is unwavering in her purpose. She knows she is on a mission of life and death, and her resolve is clear. While Holofernes sees only a beautiful, submissive woman, Judith is a lioness in disguise, prepared to strike at the perfect moment. Judith is alone in the heart of the enemy's camp, standing face to face with Holofernes, the ruthless general who has brought terror to countless lands. But Judith's heart is steady, her spirit unyielding. She knows that this night will decide the fate of Israel. Holofernes, oblivious to Judith's true intentions, invites her to a lavish feast. He is intoxicated by her beauty, his arrogance blinding him to the danger that lurks so close. Judith accepts his invitation, her calmness concealing the fierce resolve that has driven her this far. She plays the role of the humble, devoted servant, appealing to Holofernes' sense of power and self-importance. The banquet unfolds as Judith patiently awaits the moment she knows is coming. The general drinks heavily, growing increasingly drunk and careless. He revels in his impending victory, his confidence swelling with every sip. To him, Judith is just another conquest, a spoil of war, a tool for his amusement. But to Judith, he is the very symbol of oppression, the embodiment of every threat facing her people. She waits as he falls deeper into his stupor, his eyes growing heavy, his speech slurred. Then, as the camp settles into silence, and Holofernes falls into a drunken sleep, Judith knows her moment has arrived. The once mighty general lies helpless before her, oblivious to the destiny unfolding around him. Judith, with steady hands and unwavering courage, picks up his own sword. This is the sword of the enemy, the weapon used to instill fear in her people, and she holds it now not as an instrument of oppression, but as a tool of deliverance. With one swift, decisive movement, she brings the sword down upon him, severing his head. The very symbol of Assyrian power lies before her, defeated by the hand of a single woman, a widow from Bethulia. In Judith 13:8, the scripture captures this moment of triumph. She struck his neck twice with all her might and cut off his head. It is a scene of victory, a powerful act of divine justice carried out through human bravery. Judith places Holofernes' head in a sack, and with calm, determined steps, she exits the tent. She and her maid leave the Assyrian camp under the cover of darkness, making their way back to Bethulia. The journey back is filled with an overwhelming sense of relief and triumph. She has not only survived, she has delivered her people from annihilation. The enemy's power has been decapitated, quite literally. As dawn breaks, Judith stands before the gates of Bethulia, holding the ultimate proof of God's deliverance. She unveils the severed head of Holofernes to the people, who erupt in cries of victory and praise to God. Their despair turns to astonishment, their fear to unshakable faith. Judith's actions, her courage and her cunning have secured their salvation. She is not only a heroine, but a living testament to the power of faith and the courage that God can ignite in those who trust him fully. As the sun rises over the aftermath and celebration, Bethulia, a new day dawns for Israel, one marked not by fear but by triumph. News of Holofernes' death spreads like wildfire, sending shockwaves through the Assyrian camp. The once fearsome soldiers, deprived of their leader, are thrown into chaos and terror. Holofernes had been their strength, their symbol of invincibility, and without him, they lose all resolve. The Assyrian army scatters in confusion, their unity shattered by the death of their general at the hands of a single, unarmed woman. The people of Bethulia, who had cowered behind their walls, now rise up with newfound courage. They surge out of the city, pursuing the fleeing Assyrians, who are utterly defenseless without Holofernes to lead them. What had been a siege, a seemingly hopeless stand, turns overnight into a sweeping victory. The tables have turned in a way that defies logic, leaving no doubt that this deliverance is the work of God. Israel has been saved not by force of arms, but by the faith and bravery of Judith herself, is greeted with reverence and awe upon her return to Bethulia. She is no longer just a widow or a woman of quiet piety. She's a heroine, a symbol of divine strength. The elders of Israel, the same men who had doubted God's willingness to save them, bow before her in gratitude, recognizing the profound faith that led to their salvation. They marvel at her wisdom, her courage, and the way she walks straight into the lion's den, carrying nothing but her trust in God. Judith's words in Judith ring out as a victory song for all Israel. I will sing to my God a new song. O Lord, you are great and glorious, wonderful in strength, invincible. A massive celebration breaks out as Israel gathers to praise God and honor Judith. The Book of Judith describes how the people rejoice, lifting songs and offering sacrifices, acknowledging that God has delivered them through the hands of a humble widow. Her story becomes a song of courage sung by generations to come. Judith's victory is more than just a moment of triumph. It's a message to all of Israel. A reminder that God's strength is made perfect in what the world sees as weakness. Through Judith, God's power is displayed in the unlikeliest of vessels. The story does not end with Judith's victory, however. The Book of Judith tells us that she lives a long life, honored and respected by all. Yet she never remarries. Judith remains independent, devoted to God alone, a woman who walked a path few could follow. Her legacy lives on as a testament to what faith can achieve, inspiring countless generations to trust God even in the darkest of times. Judith's story is a reminder that courage, when fueled by faith, can overcome any force of darkness. Her life challenges us to ask ourselves what risks we are willing to take when we believe in God's power. How far are we willing to go to stand for what we know is true? If this story of Judith's bravery and unshakable faith resonates with you, let us know in the comments. Would you like to see more about hidden figures like Judith, whose stories reveal the depth and strength of God's providence? Don't forget to subscribe and share the Young Elders channel as we continue exploring the powerful, often forgotten figures in the scriptures. Because Judith's story is not just history, it's a call to live fearlessly in faith. It is not clear whether the Book of Judith was originally written in Hebrew, Aramaic, or Greek, as the oldest existing version is from the Septuagint, a Greek translation of the Hebrew scriptures. However, due to the large number of Hebraisms in the text, it is generally agreed that the book was written in a Semitic language, probably Hebrew or Aramaic, rather than Koine Greek. When Jerome completed his Latin Vulgate translation, he asserted his belief that the book was written in Chaldean Aramaic words. Jerome's Latin translation was based on an Aramaic manuscript and was shorter because he omitted passages that he could not read or understand in the Aramaic that otherwise existed in the Septuagint. The Aramaic manuscript used by Jerome has long since been lost. Carey A. Moore argued that the Greek text of Judith was a translation from a Hebrew original and used many examples of conjectured translation errors, Hebraic idioms, and Hebraic syntax. The extant Hebrew manuscripts are very late and only date back to the Middle Ages. The two surviving Hebrew manuscripts of Judith are translated from the Greek Septuagint and the Latin Vulgate. The Hebrew versions name important figures directly, such as the Seleucid king Antiochus IV Epiphanes, and place the events during the Hellenistic period when the Maccabees battled the Seleucid monarchs. However, because the Hebrew manuscripts mention kingdoms that had not existed for hundreds of years by the time of the Seleucids, it is unlikely that these were the original names in the text. Jeremy Corley argued that Judith was originally composed in Greek that was carefully modelled after Hebrew and pointed out Septuagintalisms in the vocabulary and phrasing of the Greek text. The Book of Judith can be split into two parts or acts of approximately equal length. Chapters 1-7 describe the rise of the threat to Israel, led by King Nebuchadnezzar and his general Holofernes, and is concluded as Holofernes' worldwide campaign has converged at the mountain pass where Judith's village, Bethulia, is located. Chapters 8-16 then introduce Judith and depict her heroic actions to save her people. The first part, although at times tedious according to whom, in its description of the military developments, develops important themes by alternating battles with reflections and rousing action with rest. In contrast, the second half is devoted mainly to Judith's strength of character and the beheading scene. Today, it is generally accepted that the Book of Judith's historicity is dubious. The fictional nature is evident from its blending of history and fiction, beginning in the very first verse, and is too prevalent thereafter to be considered the result of mere historical mistakes. The names of people are either unknown to history or appear to be anachronistic, and many of the place names are also unknown. While the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops currently considers the book to be historical fiction, the Catholic Church long considered the book to be a historical document, and it is included with the other historical books in the Old Testament of Catholic Bibles. For this reason, there have been various attempts by both scholars and clergy to understand the characters and events in the book as either an allegorical representation of actual events or a historical document that had been altered or translated improperly. The practice of changing names has been observed in documents from the Second Temple period, such as the Damascus document, which apparently contains references to an uncertain location referred to by the pseudonym of Damascus. The writings of the Jewish historian Flavius Josephus also frequently differ from the biblical record regarding the names of the high priests of Israel. Elsewhere in the Bible there are also names of rulers that are unknown to history, such as Darius the Mede from the Book of Daniel or Ahasuerus from the Book of Esther. The large size of the Assyrian army and the large size of the Median walls in the book have also been criticized, but both of these have been attested to elsewhere in the Bible and in secular historical records. The Assyrian army that besieged Jerusalem in 2 Kings 19 was said to have been 185,000 strong, a number several tens of thousands larger than the Assyrian army described in the Book of Judith. Also, the Greek historian Herodotus described the walls of Babylon to have been similar in size and extravagance to the walls of Ecbatana in the Book of Judith. Herodotus's account was corroborated by similar accounts of the scale of the walls of Babylon by the historians Strabo, Ctesias and Cleitarchus. The identity of the Nebuchadnezzar in the book has been debated for thousands of years, and various rulers have been proposed by scholars, including Ashurbanipal, Artaxerxes III, Tigranes the Great, Antiochus IV Epiphanes, Cambyses II, Xerxes I, and Darius the Great. Although there is no historically recorded Bethulia, the Book of Judith gives an extremely precise location for where the city is located, and there are several possible candidates of ancient towns in that area that are now ruins. It has widely been speculated that, based on location descriptions in the book, that the most plausible historical site for Bethulia is Shechem. Shechem is a large city in the hill country of Samaria, on the direct road from Jezreel to Jerusalem, lying in the path of the enemy at the head of an important pass, and is a few hours south of Geba. The Jewish Encyclopedia subscribes to the theory, suggesting that it was called by a pseudonym because of the historical animosity between the Jews and Samaritans. The Jewish Encyclopedia claims that Shechem is the only location that meets all the requirements for Bethulia's location, further stating, "The identity of Bethulia with Shechem is thus beyond all question." Charles Cutler Torrey pointed out that the description of water being brought to the city by means of an aqueduct from a spring above the city on the south side is a trait that can only belong to Shechem.